Okay, well, welcome to everybody. Great to see you all here. For the people who are here this morning, I am going to just be letting everybody know who wasn't here this morning. We're going to be using Slido for questions, so slido.com. The people in the morning actually used it in Cape Town, which was great. In Joburg and Durban, people weren't that good. So the hashtag, though, for the Slido this afternoon is not invest. It's now the word disrupt. So if everybody now needs to go to slido.com and just use the word disrupt in order to ask questions. Okay. Then I just wanted to remind everyone, of course, there is that pad and pen. This afternoon you might want to be writing down quite a bit in terms of the crazy things that you're going to learn. There's a lot, and Willem goes very fast. Again, as I explained, though, we do have the Facebook post that all the links that Willem will talk about, things that he will share, those will all be posted to the Facebook post for you to be able to have a look at after the event, as well as to share with your friends and family that couldn't be here today. So please do that. I want to just ask everyone a quick question. You can cheat because there is a form on your desk which is the feedback form for this afternoon. But who here can give me 3 exponential technologies without looking at the form? Let's say before you arrived here today, who here could at least give me 3 exponential technologies that they know? Okay, but just by a show of hands, who could give 3? Who thinks they could give 3? Okay. That's good to know. So there's a lot of people here who don't know what I'm actually talking about. Like, what the hell's an exponential technology? Yes. Okay. So that's good to know. Hopefully that means Willem will possibly change the pace of his voice as he's talking today. But in terms of those forms, please do fill them out. Jenny from Wealth Migrate and from marketing events, she said that we need to, at some stage, I think maybe after the tea break, say, okay, fill in the forms, everyone pass down to the left so that we can get everyone to actually fill them in. It's really important that you do that. There is a question on there around education for children in terms of exponentials, and that's something that Willem's very passionate about. In Joburg, we had, I think, about 10 kids in the room. And, I don't know if Scott told the story today around Henny's daughter. But, essentially, I don't see anyone under the age of 20 here today. But you are. Okay, awesome. But in Joburg, we had quite a few kids, which was really cool. And Willem is looking at an opportunity in terms of teaching kids exponential technology. And so that's something that we really need you to tick off, but he'll talk more about that. Before we invite Willem up, Scott's just going to sort of get everyone into the room in terms of where this fits in with what happened this morning. So this morning we were talking all about real estate, and we're going into exponential technology, and this is sort of the little bridge awesome. To get you there. So over to you, Kevin. Scott.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it. So just for those of you who just joined us, the story he referred to was actually Henny's daughter at the age of 16 came to a talk like this. It was very funny. I remember there were 200 people in the room, and I looked back, and at the end of the day I said there were only 3 kids. And I literally went to Henny, I said, why are your 3 kids here? And he literally said to me, what could they learn at school today that would be more important than learning from Clem Santa, Dr. Dolph DeRoos, and Robin Banks? And I tell you what, that was 6 years later, watching what's happened to his daughter, and quite frankly his other kids, has just been amazing. So I think that's what Kevin's referring to. I know I mentioned it earlier in terms of learning this. The one thing I will say about what you've had to learn this afternoon, there's not one person that's an expert on the planet, because this is so new that everyone's learning. So whether you are 60 years old, 50 years old, 40 years old, 20 years old, or even 15, you can actually be an expert in this space. Is that fair? So I think it's pretty awesome. Okay, right, so let's just draw the one parallel of feedback we had in Joburg was it was kind of a bit disjointed because you had kind of property and investing and technology in the morning, and then how the hell did that marry together with exponential technologies, and what's the difference? So the logic and the way we were thinking was that if you look at these different brands, every single one of them you should probably recognize, and every single one of them went in and disrupted a space. So whether it was Uber disrupting the taxis, or Amazon disrupting books and online retail, or Facebook disrupting advertising, Airbnb, I think you get the point. But what's really interesting is that I like to always try and simplify things. And there's only 3 things that every single one of those companies did when it disrupted the industry. The first one is that it cut out the middlemen. The second one is that it cut the costs. And the third one is that it increased the trust, the transparency, and the accessibility. Literally, those were what they did. So why the value? Because when you look at just these companies, and I just wanted to show you why what Willem's about to share with you is so important. Because if you look at Delta, okay, Delta started in 1924. It's the oldest airline in the world. It's operational in 334 cities and 64 countries. It's got 80,000 employees, and its value is 37.9 billion, of which something around 12 billion is actually airplanes. You compare it to Uber, it started in 2009. It's in 82 countries and 657 cities. It's got less than 6,700 employees, and it's worth $68 billion. Marriott started in 1927. It's got 200,000 employees, 487 properties. It's in 80 countries. It's got 697,000 rooms. It's worth about $18 billion. I don't know how much of that is actually property. And it was also the first company, by the way, to let people book online in 1995. But you compare it to Airbnb, that has 6,188 employees. It started in 2008. It's in 65,000 cities and 192 countries. It's got 3 million listings, so literally 3 times Marriott, and it's worth $31 billion. And for me, what's interesting is that when you look at what Willem's about to share with you, I wanted to share one web page with you, and then I'm going to hand over. Where's it going? Just give me. So when companies come in and disrupt these industries, what's fascinating is that a lot of value is created as well. And this here is a little graph that keeps getting updated. But it's of technology companies that have joined, basically become unicorns. So they've become a valuation of $1 billion or more back since January 2014.
While you're watching that and getting wowed, just in terms of Slido, the word is disrupt. And in terms of the Facebook page, it is Wealth Migrate's Facebook page, which is just Wealth Migrate.
Cool. So if you look here, this company here, I think you've all heard of, Uber, 68 billion. Anyone know who Didi is? Not you. Who is it? It's Uber China. So when Uber pulled out of China, they bought 20% of Didi, and Didi invested $1 billion in Uber. This other one here is Xiaomi that does security. I think you've all heard of Airbnb. And the only reason that I wanted to kind of give you those slides is that for me, a lot of what Willem's going to show you is going to shock you. But equally, what I think is really important is that in the back of your mind, you need to be saying to yourself, well, what can I do in my business? How can I improve my business? Or what should I be focusing on in life? Because I think the one thing that I virtually guarantee you're going to feel today is overwhelm. It's going to be a lot of ideas, a lot of technologies, a lot of things happening fast. But what I always try and do is, how do I simplify that? How does that change what I do? Is that fair? Or how do I see the world? And so I asked you a question before lunch. You know, what we're focusing on is this $13 trillion real estate industry. And what I'm going to do once Willem finishes is just wrap it up and show how these multiple technologies are coming together and how it's fundamentally going to shift the technology industry, and there will be equal opportunity for companies that play in that space. Is that fair? Because it just gives you a real-life context to all these different technologies. So without further ado, I wanted to hand over to Willem. I'm going to just change over the laptops here. Oh, wow. I'm not going to change over the laptops. Technology is amazing. But from Willem's perspective, I'll let him introduce himself. We met about 3 months ago, and he actually left the corporate world a month ago. And Kevin, myself, and Willem were sitting, and we actually tried to, for those of you who weren't here this morning, we tried to do a short event in March, and the feedback we had from people was it was trying to drink from a fire hose. It was just far too much information. So what we decided to do was to help you drink from the fire hose for an entire day. So we tried to break the property in the morning and then the technology in the afternoon. But without further ado, I wanted to share with Willem, the last thing I would say before I get off the stage is that to go to Singularity University for a 1-week course costs you about $14,000 to $15,000. To fly all the way there, yeah, that's just for your ticket. Then you still got to go there, have your accommodation, flights, and everything else. Most people around the world don't even have the ability to get into the course, let alone afford it. What you're going to learn today is so cutting edge and front foot. Very, very few people have had access to it. And so enjoy it, take lots of notes, and if you're feeling overwhelmed, I would be very surprised if you're not by the end. Okay,
cool.
Over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Scott, thanks for that warm introduction. Very nice to be back in Cape Town. I studied just up the road, not down the road. It's been a running joke on this entire roadshow that Scott and I have been going through. So if you hear some Stellenbosch versus UCT chirps, you know where that's coming from. Yeah, as Scott had mentioned, I used to be in corporate. At the time, I believe that I had probably the sexiest job on the planet because I literally got paid to fly around the world to find cradles of innovation and understand what's happening in the world of technology. It got out of hand at one stage, I will be honest with you. I did this for 3 years. By the end of 3 years, I know most of the Emirates pilots' middle names and their wives' names. And it got to the point that we always joke where, I'd get home and my dog would believe that I'm a burglar because I've been away for so long and didn't know who I was. But in all of that time, obviously I've had some fantastic opportunities to be exposed to some really, really cool things. And the idea was to teach corporates about it. I held a fundamental belief that we need to take this to empower people with, not just in corporates. Corporates move slow, and there's a lot of bureaucracy and bullshit, and I can say that now that I'm out. So I'm going to cut through the bullshit today, and I'm just going to show you how it is. And some of the stuff will hurt a little bit. Some of the stuff might make a bit of heart rate increases. That's fine. It's all part of reality. In fact, I kept this as a remnant of the consulting days, which I know I'm no longer in. But we used to say to CEOs, careful now. Strap on your seatbelt, because what we're about to go down this rabbit hole, sometimes will feel like very sci-fi and very Hollywood. But I've included for that purpose real life examples of where this is currently happening. So nothing that I talk about is going to be, we think it will. It's empirically provable. And then, of course, this bit for the people in the back that can't read this far, what you're about to see cannot ever be unseen. Part of why I retired was because, as I'd said, the corporates move too slowly. But once you get into this sort of mind frame, you can never, ever let it go. So I should have actually put that little matrix slide up now. It said the blue pill or the red pill. If you don't want to take the red pill with me today, we've got 2 exits here. This one is a bit faster, but you'll have to jump. That one's got stairs. Run now, because what we're about to do is going to be uncomfortable. The reason, of course, why it is uncomfortable, because every single thing that we've gotten used to and that we've grown a familiarity with over the last number of years, call it 75 years to 100 years, is now subject to being touched and being disrupted. And just by the way, the word disrupted, I hate it because it's like the word awesome. Every schmuck uses it and probably uses it wrong, all right? So, but for the purposes of just communicating faster, we're going to talk about disruption in this space. Specifically, as an example, you'll see how talent starts to change. In other words, who works at our organizations? Or if we are working at those organizations, what is it that we want? What is it that we demand? What is it that will draw us to get up out of bed every day? And that's one aspect of it. The goods and services that consumers want is also starting to change. I'll show you a banking slide a little bit later on. And of course, Starbucks being a massive proponent in this space. They actually only sell 6 different types of coffee, but they sell them in 66,000 different combinations. Whether that's the size of the cup that you get it in, or whether it's genetically modified milk, or high pulp, low pulp, medium pulp, no pulp, GMA, added vitamins, non-added vitamins, you make it your own. And by virtue of this choice that we as consumers now have, and also the enterprise's ability to deliver to those choices, we find that we've become way more demanding. So what we want and when we want it, or if they're your customers, how they want it and when they want it, has now also started to change. You see this instant gratification trait of human beings now being accentuated through the use of technology. And so what you used to be able to get away with 50 years ago, think SAA, with bad service, is now subject, and we're feeling the first tremors of it in this changing economy, just no longer will be accepted. And there will be competitors to take the stead of the individuals or the incumbents that don't adhere to what customers want. So in other words, clients starting to change, market structures start to change, and if you stand back far enough and you look at all these aspects of business that are busy changing, it leaves no stone unturned. And as a consequence, slide number 2, because if you're the CEO that used to believe in a 9% growth success story, your time has come. And it's over. I used to do this talk in places like Tel Aviv and Dallas, and my favorite place to do this was at Stanford, which was just Palo Alto, sort of San Francisco area. And there were Fortune 500 companies that had their CEOs there. And you had to tread very carefully about how you spoke to these oaks. Because it's all political correct, so give us the real information, but then if you piss us off, we get a little bit uncomfortable, then we don't come back. So it was kind of a conundrum, which is also partly why I'd gotten out, because there's just so much crap and bullshit in that space. Ladies and gents, so the corporate slide that used to reign was the one in the middle, and then I made it for normal people around the sides. But there's still some value here, right? So the straight gray line that grows at 9%, and perhaps you've had some exposure in this space, is when you go away to do the budget for your business unit manager or for the CEO if you're on the board or whatever the case might be. And you have to go fundamentally revamp it, and because this year we're going to really go big. And then in the end, the conversation sounds something like, yeah, maybe a little bit more on the revenue, a little bit lower on the cost, and you make some ordinary adjustments, and you're back to sort of a 9% growth story, which was fine when investors could bank on 9% only, and that's what the expectation was. But that expectation has changed, primarily by virtue of exponential technologies, the ones that I've listed around here. In fact, there's another one that I should put on, which I'll quickly talk about at the end. Effectively, you'll hear me say the word exponential probably, I'm going to try for 500 times today. In Joburg, it was 467 times. In KZN, it was closer to 490. You're going to be sick of it by the end of the day, and I'll show you why it's so important. We are not talking about technology that is evolutionary. I'm not going to touch on that. So making a process a little bit better. I'm not going to talk about how do I squeeze another 1 or 2% into the efficiencies. In other words, how do I add a calculator to an arithmetic sum? We're going to talk about how do we get rid of the sum in its entirety, or the effects of these disruptors in that space. So each one of these technologies individually, we might have read about, we might have YouTubed it a little bit. I heard someone say 3D printing. And so you might know a little bit about 3D printing, or a lot. That's great. Each of those individual technologies looked at in isolation have got an element of predictability to them, an element of. But when they start to converge on one another, they create this chaos, which is why there's that scatter graph. And no one really knows what that future looks like, because so many of these technologies are impacting the rate of growth of one another. And so you find this exponential space in which prediction just simply isn't possible anymore. And that's typically why I believe the corporate guys are so scared of this, and also us as private individuals. Because I can't predict that future anymore, and I'm expected to still meet the KPI or a specific return for shareholders. And if I can't promise that, well then my 2.4 kids, my white picket fence, my Volvo, ski trip in March, and my kids going to Kuro, all of a sudden is in jeopardy. And that is a problem. And therefore, you find that people do a calculation. And ladies and gents, I've done this 1,000 times. I can now tell from body language in what mind space you are. Because initially I get head a little bit to the side, perhaps a little bit of a frown, like, that's interesting, can that really happen? And then a little bit of sort of reiteration from this seemingly very volatile thing that I'm talking about. And eventually I get folded arms, so not just because you folded yours now, I know that that's just a comfortability thing, but in combination that body language starts to pick up. And then I know I'm in deep, deep trouble when chin goes to neck, and someone looks back and they shake the head, and I know they're going, that is just bullshit, it will never happen. So I've learned to watch this. The reason why that calculation happens, or there is a calculation that happens inside of the corporate space, is the individuals that are showcased this data do this time thing, right? So they say, how long before this technology hits me or my business unit or the thing that I'm responsible for, and until when am I still going to be here? And if I'm going to be here for a long time, I've got problems. They typically go white-faced or refuse it. Will never happen. This is nonsense. And the one that has a shorter time frame goes, well, not my problem. It's the next guy's problem. So I can just carry on, do things as they will. I'll resist this for a little while. Nothing needs to change. And I'll bugger off by the time that this becomes reality and it's the next guy's problem. We've seen that all over. Incidentally, if that is your company, please let me know. I would love to short your shares because I think we can see what's going to happen after this talk. From the top left to the bottom right, I'll go sort of around in circle. Up there, we've got nanotech. I'll talk about that. Next to that, AI, machine learning. Big thing. They're different. People think they're the same, and the term is interchangeably used. It's not. It's very different. Mixed reality, not virtual reality or augmented necessarily. Robotics, synthetic biology. Down here, one of my favorites, which is space, drones, energy, the blockchain, Internet of Things, 3D printing, and the power of the crowd. There should be another one on here, as I'd mentioned, that's called the generative design. So if you are making a note, write that down. Generative design will blow your mind in terms of where it's going in the world of architecture and what it will mean to have a human job sort of in the next 3 to 5 years. Okay. As I said, exponential, exponential, exponential. I hope Kevin is taking notes on the number, so we're down to double digits now. The reason why I say that there will be exponential changes and why all these technologies are exponential in nature is because all of them are based on this, which is Moore's Law. If you've heard of Moore's Law, great. If you haven't, the dude that founded the Intel Corporation. In other words, the company responsible for all, well, not all, but the majority of microchips on the planet. Every single computing device in this room today, of which there are lots, there's about 70 or 80 people I counted standing at the back. There will be more than 80 Intel chips in the room today. And the guy that founded the Intel Corporation, 1950s and 60s, Gordon Moore, had this view of technology that suggested technology would double in its capability on an annual basis. Now, it turns out he was wrong, and I'll show you how. He underestimated this. Bear in mind that he was in the space of saying, how many transistors can I squeeze into a wafer of silicon? Because that's the sort of computing power correlation. And that the transistors would double inside of silicon on an annual basis. And so if you drew the advancement in transistors over time, you find that the line wasn't straight. The line was logarithmic or exponential. I do this talk, as I had mentioned, all over the planet. And when I got to MIT, a very clever engineering student said to me, there is a better graph for you. And I was like, what do you, like, he does this in front of 1,000 people. What do you mean there's a better graph? He's like criticizing my slide in the middle of my bloody talk. So I indulged it. I said to him, what do you think? So he made me switch on the AirDrop on my phone, and he dropped this thing on. And since then, I've been using it. That is another representation for engineers, typically, of Moore's Law. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I will admit to you today that I still don't know how to read this graph. But there is a graph for my slides, so I put it in there. If you're an engineer, enjoy. And if you are just a normal human, I think this is the same thing in a different way, which I can talk to. Okay. So effectively what this shows is time on the sort of horizontal axis and the advancement in technology on the vertical axis. And if you plotted the advances, you'd see that they are increasing in pace. That's the logarithmic nature thereof. But here's the thing about this curve. It suggests that there is a moment of singularity. Can I just see by show of hands who's heard of the term? Moment of singularity, of course. Okay, I see some familiar faces also. Any of those familiar faces care to define it for the rest of the audience? No? I want to talk in front of everyone? That's fine. Okay, so effectively what moment of singularity refers to is that there would be, if you follow me on the graph, an infinitely small fraction of time in which there would be an infinitely large advancement in tech. Because obviously as this thing carries on in it, the angle of the line picks up and picks up and picks up. At some point, a very small space of time represents a very large, almost infinite, theoretically, advancement in the tech. And the thinking is that in that moment of that advance, technology would be able to look at itself, notice its own flaws, architecturally speaking, fix those flaws with improvement, and then implement it. And in the next moment, to do it again. And in the next moment, again and again and again and again. Thereby giving rise to this sentient consciousness that is able to look at itself and recognize that it is looking at a being. In other words, what most people term incorrectly, by the way, is artificial intelligence. Okay, and that's where Hollywood gets this. And that's just, I mean, it's tantalizing, right? They're just salivating at the opportunities of telling stories around this. The robots look at us and they think that we overpopulate and pollute the planet, so we're a virus. And they try to exterminate us. Let's make a movie and call it Terminator, or Skynet, the enemy, or The Matrix. Okay, now you can see how quickly you can get onto that soapbox. We're going to pause pre that soapbox. We do have the Wealth Partner Dinner tonight. I've had some questions around this in other forums in other parts of the country, and I'm happy to have that over a gin and tonic or a beer with you. For the purposes of this conversation, think investing, think business, think how the landscape's changing. We're going to pause before the moment of singularity and have a look at the types of impacts that we are likely to find, realistically speaking. So no storytelling, just the real deal. And that makes it quite uncomfortable. We prove the advancement in tech by virtue of a very simple example, the music industry, which everyone has had access to, and I am going to prove it to you, and you're going to work with me. Incidentally, I didn't say this in the beginning. I over-lecture, right? So let's just make this a conversation. If at any stage you think, pause, rewind, say that again, what the hell does that mean? Or you're talking bullshit, tell me. Tell me so we can actually have a conversation. I flew here for that. I didn't fly here to lecture. I've had enough lectures in my life. Okay. So here's the music industry. Let's make an example. 1877 saw the first gramophone player. 1926 had the first LP. So you remember those vinyls that the DJs now use for sort of a retro feel. Took 30 years to get to the tape deck, 20 years to get to CDs. Incidentally, at this stage of tape deck, we already had digital media because the recording on the tape is a 1 or a 0. So the absence or the presence of an electronic bit. So it was already digital in this era, but the medium on which the media was recorded was still physical. That's the tape. And then it got supercharged over here in the 80s when you had CDs introduced. So the format was CDA. You could put about 15 songs onto a CD. Okay, then it became fully digitized. MP3, and this is important. It became a fully digitized industry because now the medium and the media both are ones and zeros and intangible for that. So not really something you can touch. And then look at the advancement. It got to DVDs. Okay, again, I understand that the medium is physical there, but just look at the advancement, right? So CDs, you could put 15 songs in CDA format on a CD. MP3s, you could put about 600. With DVDs, you could put about 6,000. So Moore was wrong. It's not doubling. It's adding zeros as it's going along. All right? Then it got into iTunes, so music as a service, if you like, disintermediating all of the record labels, of course. All of them had initial problems with it. Now they can't believe they never thought of it earlier and kicking themselves for not starting it by themselves. Devices that supported music as a service, and now proliferation of services. Apple Radio, or Apple Music, I think it's called, Spotify, Pandora, there's a variety of them. Okay, and they've become ubiquitous. In other words, I have multidisciplinary or inter-device capability as regards my music service now. And I'll give you an example. I walk into Palo Alto shopping mall. It's 10 miles away from my hotel. I got dropped off there by a ride-sharing platform car. And I walk in, and I'm being a typical yuppie because I've got some earphones in my ears, and I'm looking at my phone as I'm walking in. And someone bumps into me coming out. I'm going in. The phone drops. Screen shattered. Irritating. Happened to all of us. We know what the process is now. Someone's got to take the screen off and fix it, or you've got to see what the damage is, claim it for insurance, and then get a new phone. I'm in a foreign country. This is irritating. Finish the shopping, wrap it up, walk back out, realize I need to get 10 miles from where I am now, look for a cab. Guess what? In Palo Alto, there are no more yellow cabs. That entire industry is gone. The only industries that now operate in the ride space is BlaBlaCar, Arcade City, Lyft, and Uber. And all of them require you to have a mobile device to which your credit card is linked to be able to catch a ride. So gone are the taxi, like the New York style. It's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. Damn it, okay? Irritating. Takes me a bit more time. Turn around, back into the shop, get the latest phone, walk back out. Now I'm uploading cloud as I'm going in. Remember all your bloody passwords. Now you kick yourself for being so secure that you have different passwords, but you've got to remember each one of those passwords. Tick, 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 tick. I'm loading all my accounts. I call the Uber car. The thing shows up. As I get to the door and reach for it, my phone beeps. I have a quick look, and it says, hey, I noticed you're about to get into an Uber car, but I also noticed that before you were listening to music off a particular playlist, would you mind if I streamed your music playlist to this Oak's phone to connect to his car so that you can carry on listening seamlessly? Music industry, fundamentally reformed by virtue of now, and that's the word ubiquitous, right? So it's all around us all the time, everywhere. The accessibility of it becomes 100%, and it's device agnostic. I don't need this device anymore. Other people's devices could now probably take care of my needs for me. So the consumer has now changed. Now let me show you something else that's very interesting that's happened during the evolution or the revolution of this music industry. I know that every single person in this room has a cell phone. I do know that because somehow you were able to make it here, which puts you in a certain LSM group inside of Africa. Inside of Africa, 800 million to 850 million people, 1.2 billion cell phones. So some have more than one. Show of hands, who has a smart device in this room today? Yeah, lekker. Who has a smart device here that has music on it? Who has a smart device here that has music on it, but you didn't pay for that music? Okay, now check what happened here. LSM1, or I don't even remember which way around it is, but top LSM. You are laughing about the fact that you've got stolen goods with you. And still laughing. And now everyone's laughing because they know it's true, and luckily I didn't pick on them. Check what's happened here. The thing that we regard as right or wrong, or the code that suggests how we classify what's right or wrong, has shifted. Suddenly. Silently in the background. Perhaps it's because of the ubiquitous nature, so now everyone can get it. I had some youngsters tell me earlier on, but if the artists want to publish digitally, they must expect us to take their music. Okay, I've actually heard that. Yeah, crazy. But what we, or not, because society has undergone a bit of an evolution in itself. And my question to you is, do you think that the technology changes us in terms of what we deem to be right and wrong, or is our deeming to be right and wrong as it shifts, influence into the technology? Or, in fact, is it both? The one is influencing the other all the time, driving this force forward into places where we haven't even begun to explore within ourselves what this means for us. So when I say uncomfortable stuff about to follow, I'm not just talking about the tech changes and the market changes. I'm talking about the things that we will be faced with. And judging by who's in the room, you are part of the top 1% of the world, which means that you play societal leadership roles. And even if you don't actively do that, you're a parent or going to be a parent at some stage, which means that you're going to instill some values into other people that will come onto this planet and that will be dealing with this landscape, which means that we're going to have to know very, very clearly what we stand for and what we don't stand for in an era that's now starting with the initial tremors of big, big change. So I just put that out there. I'm not judging. I'm just saying I think it bears some consideration. And think about that throughout the course of this conversation. Now, my MIT friend also said to me, this moment of singularity is bullshit because it won't show up. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, consider the Intel Corporation, who a couple months ago announced publicly that their next processor won't double the capability of the predecessor processor again. So, in fact, they're not doubling infinitely. They stop at some stage, and it gets slower and slower. So in other words, you're not looking at a logarithmic curve, you're looking at an initially logarithmic curve that then peters off. And this is all hype, and that's how you, Oaks in Consulting, make marketing money out of this. Okay, fair challenge, but let's look at some context to this as well. Yes, we have now run into a physical limitation of how many transistors we can stick into silicon. But you know what? Computing isn't going backwards or stopping. In fact, we've now learned about light computing in the journey of exploring silicon computing. And that's the blue curve. And it too starts very slowly, starts to grow, picks up pace. More and more people get involved. That technology advances at a rapid pace. And at some stage will reach its limitations. During which time, we've already started to learn about quantum computing. And if you stand at the back of the room and you look at all these S-curves in aggregate, they again give you a logarithmic curve. So it's important to consider the context as a whole throughout the conversation that we have today. As I'd alluded to in the change of humans, the problem with all of this is that our computers haven't had a software upgrade for the last 50,000 years. And when I say our computers, I mean the thing that's in your head, right? That is your supercomputer, your and mine. And we haven't had that software upgrade. I mean, I get a little bit nervous when it gets close to new iPhone release time, but my cell phone contract isn't such that I'm going to get one of those. I'm going to have to wait a couple of months. So I'll be walking around with old tech, 8 months old tech. That worries me. The mere fact that 50,000 years has gone by without an upgrade for my main computer, kind of beside me. And of course, the environment within which this supercomputer was coded initially, since the upgrade or since inception, was very simplex. The things that we had to deal with as a society was where's their food, where's their shelter, where's their danger, and where's there someone to mate with. In Durban, they said that's not how it works. It was the other way around. Where's there someone to mate with? Where's their shelter? I didn't judge, Scott, from people from Durban. So don't worry about it. I let that one slip by you. I see you were in conversation. So the very simplex environment is now, by virtue of our doing, become way more complex. And the difference between the two is what causes this discomfort, and hence the folding of the arms, hence the folding of this. It will never happen, hence the calculation of will I be impacted by it. If you feel that, it's fine. Step one is awareness, and out of awareness comes the opportunity to choose to do something or to not do something, failing which it's oblivion. Being oblivious, I think, is bad. Being aware and choosing not to do something about it, I think, is worse, personally. Okay, now because this is quite a complex environment, what we do is we say, here's a little framework within which to digest all of this content that I'm going to give you. And I'll just briefly touch on this before we get into the media. Firstly, the first D of disruption is when something becomes digitized. Think of my MP3s, right? So it was music in hardware format, and then it became digital, and that allowed a whole bunch of things to happen. The next stage of which is a deceptive piece of growing. Two examples. Someone said 3D printing. Can I just see who said 3D printing when Kevin asked about the technologies? It was out of this sort of area of the room, I remember. Oh, he's buggered off, okay, because he's heard this. All right. Can I just ask this? How old do you think 3D printing is? Just let's do a sample test. Who believes in the room that 3D printing, and think 3D printing, incredible connection, Dion Wired. You can actually see the printers now on the high streets, right? 5 years, I have a 5. Do I have a 4? Do I have a 3? Okay, so let's say 0 to 5. Let's say 5 to 7. Show of hands. No. How old is the technology today? What's the, like if it had a birthday today, how old would it be? You say 30. I had a 5. 15. Sort of show of hands for under 20. Okay, the way I ask it makes you a bit reluctant. 20 to 30? You want to change your bet? Okay, you can feel the rhythm changing. It's 39 years old. It's 39 years old, but just to know about it, because the garage entrepreneurs that have been tinkering and playing with this technology, trying to develop it, seeing where it can go, making a mistake, getting out of the mistake, trying another approach, very deceptive. We don't know about them because they're in the backyards playing with this stuff. So very slowly the thing starts to grow. And because the numbers initially are so slow, it remains deceptive. How big can this really get? Let's think of the first digital camera. 0.01 megapixels. Can you imagine buying a 0.01 pickup? Never, because you can't see the bloody picture on it, right? But 0.02 was the next year. Still too small to worry about. That's never going to change anything. Then it became 0.04. Still too small. 0.8, 0.16, 32, 64, 128. Yeah, maybe there's something in this. Now, every single cell phone in the world has probably a 15 megapixel camera on this. A mere couple of years later. So it goes through this deceptive phase. When it hits maturity in that space, it becomes really disruptive. You have heard the Kodak example. I'll show you what actually happened there a little bit later. And then it dematerializes. So like the music, it becomes ubiquitous. I don't have to carry a tape with me anymore. Or, you know, by chance I carry the phone with me, but that's for call purposes. The music I can get on any one of my devices or your devices, so I don't need to carry it around. It dematerializes. The consequence of that is that it demonetizes and democratizes. Example, $150 for a CD with 15 songs in it. I buy it for the 3 songs that I like. I don't play the other 12 songs, you know, or very rarely play them. And $150 is a big number to roll out in other LSM groups. But now it's been demonetized. In other words, I buy one song for $1. Now that's a lot more affordable than having to fork out $15 for 15 songs. And I can make my own collage. Perhaps my collage is only worth $8. So more people get to participate, hence the democratization thereof. So if you hear about these technologies, stick it through that framework. And if you're wondering where will this go, this is a good way, not to predict the future, because no one can do that, but at least get a view of the principles that will be involved in the evolution of this technology. Okay, let's look at some of the fun stuff here. I'm going to show you artificial intelligence and machine learning first. All right. Talking a lot. Target is a US fast consumer goods shop. It's like a macro. It sells a lot of stuff, typically in bulk and cheap. And what they have is a smart shopper card. You know, and I'm sure people here have it. There's a Woolworths card, the W Rewards, and there's a Pick and Pay blue smart shopper card. And you've heard me say this before. It's the card that seems great because you spend 400,000 Rand and then you get 6 Rand off on your next purchase. Okay, and that's not because discount is something that, you know, benevolent organizations want to give away. They want to know who you are. That's why they do this, for data analytics. Target had a similar program. We had the red card, and it was called, the campaign was called The Redder, The Better. And what they did was to accumulate information on consumers, but not 10 consumers, not 100,000 consumers, hundreds of millions of consumers, because they're not only in the US. And then what they did is they analyzed the data for patterns, and they found some interesting things, one of which was that they could predict when a woman was pregnant by virtue of how her data shows her shopping habits changing, but they could do it before the woman knew that she was pregnant. So whether that was the combination of stuff that she bought, or when she bought, or what store she bought at, or where she went to in the shop first or last, or whatever the case might be, or what she put on Facebook in combination with what she'd bought, they knew that she was pregnant. In fact, there's a story about how super predictive these analytics got through teams of actuaries that combed through this data. That there was this father that was, he barged into a Target shop, and he grabbed a hold of the store manager in Target, and he had him by the lapels, and he shook him around, and he said, what the hell do you, it's a little bit different from the, so pardon me for softening the dialogue, but what the hell do you think you're doing? And the store owner says, I don't even know who you are. What are you talking about? He says, you're sending and you're advocating to my 16-year-old daughter, in other words, underage, you're advocating sexual activity for her. And the dad says, the shop owner says, sorry, the what now? I don't even know who you are. Who's your daughter? What are you talking about? And of course, what had happened is these big shops with these consumer data sets that sit behind them engineer the marketing that they send you. So in the US, it's a big thing to do coupons. I send you some discount vouchers because I know you like mountain biking. And because you like mountain biking, I send you discounts for pumps and tires and saddles. Because you like fishing, I send you some bait and hooks and rods discounts. You live next to each other in the same street, but the thing that I post you that you cut out is tailored for you. And so this girl, and the dad whips it out, it's addressed to her, and you've just sent her baby powder and formula and car seats, baby wipes. She's 16. Like, is that appropriate? And the store manager says, hey, okay, hang on. I don't own Target. It's a big organization. We don't do the marketing in store. It happens at head office. I'll come back to you on this. 2 weeks go by. Store manager hasn't found the answer. Dad walks into the shop again. Store manager starts to panic, tries to run around. There's a bit of a in the aisles chase. Eventually, the dad catches up with him and he says, and the store manager says, well, I'm so sorry. I haven't found out the answer. It's a big organization. We have a lot of bureaucracy. I can't get to the answer right now. I'm so sorry. And the dad says, hey. Calm down. I'm here to apologize because there have been some things that have been happening in my house that I might not entirely have been aware of. It turns out my daughter is in fact pregnant. But you sent me all these diaper discounts, and then I had a look at what we'll be paying for diapers, so I thought I'm going to use the discount and buy some diapers along because it's going to be an expensive endeavor. And the thing here is that a whole bunch of humans, so think 50 actuaries with 20 years worth of experience sitting inside of the data set, so it's 1,000 years worth of actuarial data experience, looked at this data and said, we think we can infer some stuff onto it. But now here's the thing. It was loaded with human bias. So yes, this is a very interesting case study, but it's still extremely limited by virtue of the fact that we infer bias onto the data because we're human. We judge things, whether you choose to acknowledge it or not. When I walked into this room, you judged me. You judged me for how I look, for how I talk, for what my posture was like, how I dress, what I do with my hair. You judge me. I know you judge me because I stand here, I'm busy judging you right now. I can feel it. We put each other in categories that we infer by virtue of the cover of the book. Because you're 25, you are a bad driver. You are full of testosterone. You will have parties. You don't have experience in driving. Your insurance premium is high. You are 50 years old. You're much more calmed down. You've lost the testosterone. You don't party at night anymore, or maybe once a year. You've got experience. You are responsible. Your premium for your auto insurance is low. Right or wrong? Mathematically, there's some correlation there. But is it causality? And I think it's not. Could it be, let me test you on this. Could it be that because you are born on a Wednesday morning between 8 and 9, that you are a safe driver? And if you were born on a Friday evening, 3 a.m., you were a bad driver? Could that be the difference? Ooh, confident. Did you test it? It's a fact. Did you test it? No. How do you know it's a fact? But it is a fact. I'm sorry, I'm not taking a stab at you personally, sir. But that is our problem, because even if you didn't have the courage to say that out loud right now, you probably also thought it, or you were at least open to looking at it, hopefully. But the thing is that we don't know. We can't make that assessment and empirically say, yes, it is, or no, it isn't, because it doesn't make sense to us. But we are a very limited race, as our pollution numbers would suggest, right? As a consequence, the power sitting within AI is near infinite because it doesn't leave those dark corners in the room untouched. It will turn those stones and look what's underneath them. And it will come back and tell you for a fact, not a, I am sure it's a fact, because that is not a fact. That is you being sure that it's a fact. It's not a fact. It will tell you empirically what the actual data correlations and causalities are. And I'm going to show you now where we are in the world of AI and machine learning. Put your seatbelt on because we're now taking the red pill. All right. Here's IBM. And my sound isn't plugged in yet, so I'm going to do a quick little Houdini here. You know, ladies and gents, they say that artificial intelligence is super easy. But AI is very easy. But AV, yeah, you can never get that 100% right. Okay, I'll quickly give you background here. This is IBM Watson, an AI/neural network. I'll talk about that in a sec. That is competing with humans in a game that we as humans like to play. On the left-hand side of the competitors, so over here, that's Ken, this is Brad. Incidentally, I want you to watch Brad's body language throughout the course of this video as it plays when he starts to realize what's busy happening with him. Notice if you can see if he's nervous or not. You can tell me afterwards. In the middle is IBM Watson. Ken is the guy that is the current world champ of Jeopardy, and Brad is the guy with the longest winning streak in the history of the game. Jeopardy is a lot like Noord vir Noord. Except the host doesn't have a ridiculous vest and lots of hairspray with 50 rand and harde contant, none of that. And the structure of the game is a little bit different. Ladies and gents, the structure. I think we've all been there on a Saturday night with Johan. En die musiekorkes. Wat die musiekfabriek. Okay, I'm from the West. All right. So, I kind of lost my train of thought there. Okay, so the game is structured a little bit differently, ladies and gents. The typical game show is question. Individual humans have got to have a big database. They search that database with their bias included. They hope to find the right answer. If they do find it, they react physically by hitting a buzzer or some button. It signifies that they know the answer. If they're first, they get the opportunity to tender their search result. And if the search result is articulated appropriately, then they would be allocated some points. This doesn't work that way. Here, they give you the answer, and you have to formulate the question, with the additional thing that you've got to be able to deal with sarcasm, nuances, innuendos, colloquialisms, slang, the way people talk. And there is a set pattern inside of this where the game show host is utilizing those unseen things of language to try and manipulate the outcome of this game. Now watch the computer play the humans. Just have a quick look at this. I'm press play here.
It's going to be hosted by a member of our Jeopardy! Clue Crew.
Perfect.
Please welcome Jimmy McGuire. Gentlemen.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. What do you say we play Jeopardy? Let's get right into the Jeopardy round. These categories: a man, a plane, a canal, Erie, Chicks Dig Me, children's book titles, My Michelle, MC5, and finally, vocabulary. Ken, you're in the first position. Please make a selection.
I've never said this on TV. Chicks Dig Me for 200, please, Jimmy.
Kathleen Kenyon's excavation of this city, mentioned in Joshua, showed the walls had been repaired 17 times. Watson.
What is Jericho?
Correct.
400, same category.
This mystery author and her archaeologist hubby dug in hopes of finding the lost Syrian city of Urkesh. Watson.
Who is Agatha Christie?
Correct.
Same category, 600.
At the Olduvai Gorge in 1959, she and hubby Lewis found a 1.75 million year old Australopithecus boise-eyed skull. Watson.
Who is Mary Leakey?
You're right.
800, same category.
Harriet Boyd Hawes was the first woman to discover and excavate a Minoan settlement on this island. Watson.
What is Crete?
Yes.
Let's finish Chicks Dig Me.
At Mount...
Okay, I'll let it play out to that point. I'll let you watch the rest on social media. Effectively, up until that point, you heard Watson talking very naturally. It doesn't seem like a robot with like a metallic type voice talking in 1 and 0 format. It's very fluid and linguistically accurate, right? So you could almost pass the Turing test through which it sounds like a human. So if you didn't look at it, you might think that you're competing with another human, in fact. Similar experiment had been done, also available on YouTube to find. Effectively, two entrepreneurs looked at this and they said, well, where else can we use this NLP, this near natural language processing capability? And let's just call it Watson technology for the purposes of this argument. It wasn't Watson, it was a combination of others, but similar type technology. And they said, what if we put it into a call center? So think Woodstock, cheap real estate, open space, cubicles, and 10,000 people doing phone calls to try and find you when you owe 10,000 Rand to Edgar's trying to do debt collection. Right? So you get a phone call because your debt from Edgar's has been handed over to a lawyer, to an EDC, external debt collector, and they get a list and they call and they say, found you. Listen, just by the way, you owe 10 grand to Edgar's. Do you know about it? Yes, I know about it. How much money do you earn? Ooh, sensitive. Don't want to necessarily talk to someone about that, but now you understand there's some legal ramifications, so you have the conversation. And they ask you, alimony, savings, any unit trusts, what other assets are there that we might be able to attach against this debt? Long story, very sensitive, alimony, kid support, all that. And then you sign a deal effectively over the phone, which has been recorded. That's, Electronic Communications Act that has changed. And we sign a new deal for repayment. That's how that works. And then you have to pay. So what if we got rid of the humans? And we use this technology to make the phone call, to do the actual negotiation of how much money you're going to pay back every month, if you can give it a bit of a script on how to think about this, and see if it can do the debt collection for us. Because now remember, it doesn't make mistakes, learns as it goes along. You put one down for voice over IP, so I don't have payroll that I have to cover. There's no unions, there's none of that. So let's give it a shot. And so they did. Supposedly, this thing was supposed to run for 9 months. After 3 months, the Watson technology tells these two oaks, listen, I want a meeting with you. Now, stop there and just digest that. Okay, if you think uncomfortable, here's a machine that you've said, make the calls off a list that I've given you to do this debt collection conversation and sign a contract electronically to do the actual repayment contract. And it is telling you that it would like a meeting with you. It's not scripted to do this. That is a problem, right? Because that is singularity stuff. So they say, okay, just firstly, if it were you, just consider for a second. Does the phone ring? Do you get an SMS? Does it? Where do you go for the meeting? Or can you just talk because it's here? How do you address it? Do you walk in? Do you sit down? Do you talk shit like the French and the Swiss do for 10 minutes to bond before? Is it okay? So funny things to think about, a little bit uncomfortable. So this technology says to them, listen, I can tell when people lie. And they say, the what now? You can tell when people lie. What do you mean? He says, yeah, I can tell when people lie. And they say, how's that possible? Well, effectively, I've listened to every single contract recording, or conversation of contract recording that I've had. I've looked at the data of how much the individual should be paying from the conversation that we had, and I married that to the actual repayments that had occurred subsequently. So if you said you were going to pay 7.50 Rand a month, did you pay 7.50 Rand a month or didn't you pay? And then I played back all the data, and I listened to how you sounded. Did you talk faster? Did the pitch change a little bit? Did you sound a little bit nervous? What was your articulation like? What was your enunciation like? And all of that data, thousands of data points, which you and I would have never picked up because we can just see, ooh, the guy's got sweaty palms. This machine can't see that. And we have a conversation as a conversation that we've had. A conversation is a collection of trillions of data points that this machine goes to every single corner, and it doesn't think that it has a fact. It goes for the actual facts out of the data. And out of that, there's correlation between how people sound and when they lie. And so it tells them, I can tell when people lie. 94% accuracy. Now, out of that, ladies and gents, came this company, Beyond Verbal. They're in Tel Aviv. And this is an app that you can download today, and it listens to you, and it tells you the state of mind that you're in. And I've been running a live demo on me as we've been doing this, and it says, I speak with motivation and dominance now. Great leadership. This thing is getting very smart. Charisma, sense of action, and the need to lead. Instinctive excitement. You can decide for yourself whether or not you believe that there's accuracy in those assessments. And the thing about this node, which makes it even more scary, other than the fact of how accurate it can get, I'll give you a little story of me in a poker game, is that that node will now teach any other node for free and immediately everything that it's learned about me. And it in turn will receive the learning of every other node on the planet that also learns something that it does not yet know. In other words, one learning curve becomes 2. 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, 8, 16, 32, 64, 256, it carries on and on and on. Sir, question? Both. I'll show you machine learning in a second, and then I'm going to come back to you, and you're going to tell me what you think it is, all right? But I'll come back to it. Quick little poker story. I have mates from the Free State. We go to Paris, and we're now a 40th birthday or a bachelor's or something. And it's late at night. The oaks say, let's play some poker. Now, someone brought a poker set. They roll the thing out. Okay, I don't play poker. I don't know how to play it necessarily. I get the bit of the rules and thing, and I think to myself, because they're predominantly more farming folk, and so they always rag me for being a yuppie. Okay, so you city boys, all that. Okay, so I thought, lekker. Now the city boy is going to show you what technology is going to do. So I run Moody's in the background, and before each of these guys place a bet, I make them talk a little bit, and I watch what Moody's thinks about their state of mind. Like, are they confident or are they bluffing a little bit? Broadly speaking, it's not geared for a poker game, but I thought, fuck it, I'm going to try it, all right? So I did. I took all of their money, and if they were here today, they would tell you, until the last hand where I went all in, because it was now 4 a.m. and I wanted to go to bed, and then someone else bloody well put a better bet in than me. But up until that point, I creamed them. My team and I, we creamed them. And ladies and gents, here's the thing. Okay, now it's time to let go, because I've now shown you a little bit of where we are, what the tech is doing. Now run with it a little bit. Where's this going? In a couple of years, you will not be able to tell a lie in society, because I will listen to you through an application. It will listen to whatever you're broadcasting, and it will give me insight into your authenticity. Now, just think of the fundamental societal reform that's going to happen in the back end of this. Where is it that you're not talking with another human, where at some point they're judging your believability to make a call as to whether or not they're going to do business with you, get married to you? Promise policy. We create jobs for everyone, ladies and gents. Ticker tape at the bottom. No, he's not going to do that. Maybe for some friends, but not for everyone. There's a big change coming here. A big change. I swear to tell the whole truth and nothing truth to help you God. The legal profession, every time you sign a contract, I would probably incorporate this type of technology to assess your commitment to actually doing what you say you're going to do on paper. The way that we interact with each other is, if this comes alive, will be fundamental reform. And now, okay, it's only one company, it's only IBM. It's not. Let me show you what Google's doing in this space. Google, a pretty big company, or Alphabet rather.
So this is
machine
the
learning.
game of
To your
Breakout,
question, sir.
and in this game, we're controlling
Let's give
the
it a bit more
bat and the
juice.
ball, and you have to break through this rainbow color brick wall. So you can see here, after 30 minutes of gameplay, the system doesn't really know how to play the game yet, but it's starting to get the hang of it, that it's supposed to move the bat towards the ball. So now after an hour in, it's a lot better, but it's still not perfect. And then if we leave it playing for another hour, now it can play the game better than any human, and it almost never misses the ball, even when it's coming back at very fast angles. So we thought, this is pretty cool, but what would happen if we just left the machine playing the game for another couple of hours? And much to our surprise, what happened was that the machine discovered for itself that optimal strategy was to dig a tunnel around the side of the wall and send the ball around the back, which is something even the programmers and research scientists working on this project didn't know how to do. We only told it to get the highest score it could. Right. So we didn't even tell it it's got to do a barrier. So you can imagine this in computer form.
Yes.
To get that's the critical part. We didn't tell it to play the game and how to move the bat and the ball. We told it get points. And the machine learning aspect of this, which I'm busy illustrating, is that the machine then works out the code required to achieve the goal. Big difference. So here, you heard it, gave the machine the code, it saw ones and zeros, didn't know that it could move the bat. Eventually, he reckoned that it could move the bat, missed the ball a couple of times. Touched the ball once, the ball rebounds, takes a chip out of the rainbow, it gets a point. That's what I'm supposed to do. Okay, now how do I do this better? Move it a little bit faster. After an hour, it plays like a bad human. After another hour, it plays like a human. After another hour, it plays better than any human. Leave it for a day, and it does something that the engineers that coded the game, the creators of the game, didn't know that you could do this. So it goes to every corner of the data, and it turns every stone, and it gives you answers that are better and faster to get there relative to a human. And again, the scary bit, when the next deep mind is switched on, it won't need to go through this evolution to get to that point of learning a knowledge base. It'll merely assume that knowledge base out of what predecessors have built for it, which means we are dealing with an exponential learning organism. There are now reports of Google AI talking to each other in code using an encryption that the humans didn't tell them to do and that the humans can't decrypt, which means that Google doesn't know what its AI machines are busy saying to each other. Okay, now Hollywood doesn't seem so far-fetched, does it? Because that's actually happening. Crazy. Absolutely. All right. AI machine learning. Let's have a little look at robotics. I'm just going to flip through some of these to give you a sense. At the top is a Chinese company. They're focusing on the interface that machines have with humans. Here it's the emotive bit. You can see the facial expression starting to change. Didn't really focus on the rest of the robot per se, but I wanted to illustrate that capability together with the capability at the bottom. This is a company by the name of Boston Dynamics. This is from January 2016, so fairly recent. If you think of my music example, this is like yesterday. All right, alpha dog, big dog, alpha dog, little dog. This is called Atlas. Atlas is a revolution in the robotic space by virtue of the fact it's a fully untethered robot. So there are no cables, in other words. What does untethered mean? There are no cables that run to it that feed it with computing power or energy. It has its own power source on board and its own computing power. And here is an example, a very good example of, how do we put this? The convergence is the word I'm looking for, between robotics and machine learning. In that, this thing was told, get to the parking lot. It's trying to get there. It has to traverse very treacherous terrain. And you can see here that some of the snow surface starts to collapse and this thing loses its balance. And it wasn't told that should you lose your balance in this way, here is what you need to do to correct it. It said, get to the parking lot, write your own code to get there. It knows that it shouldn't fall over, and when it does start to fall over, it codes for itself in that moment to take corrective action. That tells you something about the computing power and the ability of this machine to learn. If you think about GDPs in the world that are reliant on heavy labor that comes at a cheap price, have a look at this and literally let your mind go as to where this could go, because I think it's pretty clear. We're going to have a revolution inside of labor space. And while you think that that's happening at a slow pace, I wanted to show you what happened 1 year later. This is from January of this year, where the younger brother of Atlas is now also in production. It's called Handle, and Handle works with wheels and not with feet. So there's an upgrade here. Notice also the dexterity and the nimbleness of this particular unit in relation to this one over here 1 year later. In fact, it was 11.5 months. On the left-hand side, busy being illustrated what would happen if you change the goalpost. That's like walking over the snow. But to put it more prominently, I move the goalpost of what needs to happen and how this thing doesn't stand there for 16 hours and compute what the next thing is to do. It immediately responds to the environment around it. It doesn't complain. Of course, if it did complain, immediately here is the case made for a union for robots, but they don't have unions. So there's no paternity leave, there's no working conditions, no health and occupational safety, no sick leave, no bad attitude, no learning and training budgets. It's all upload. And here's the really scary thing, ladies and gents, as I had mentioned before. These robots collaborate, so they will gladly share their knowledge. If you've been in a CA article space or in a law article space or any form of internship where you show up and you pose a threat to the A-type personality that sits next to you that also wants to get to the top, you know when they learn something that's out of the ordinary that will put them ahead in front of the boss, they don't share that. They wait for the boss to show up and then roll it out like the Rolls Royce that it is in order to harness that promotionary type kudos that they try to accumulate. The robots don't. The robots say, here, I've learned something, entire community. In fact, one of the biggest challenges that we face in robotics today is how to get an Atlas to teach a Handle. In other words, if the form factor of one robot is 2 arms and 2 legs, how do I take the machine learning coding that I've developed by myself for the task sets that I've been tasked with and transpose that learning onto a robot that looks different? In other words, maybe 2 legs and 2 wheels and 2 arms, or 6 legs or no legs. And that's actually busy happening. Machines are finding ways of cross-pollinating the code, cognizant of the form factor that differs. Ma'am, there was a question in the back. No? Okay, it was a stretch. Cool, no problem. Big yours? All right. Ma'am. Yes. The question for the ones in the back that couldn't hear, the question is, do I think that it would be the case that robots make other robots? That is a brilliant question. We had that one only once before, and that was, I think, in Durban as well. Yes. So I've been privy to an example, which I haven't included here because, number one, the video footage of the experiment is still, I wouldn't say classified, it's IP that they don't want to expose just yet, but I can talk about it freely. So using quantum computing, there was an example of what would happen if you let robots evolve. And so an experiment was done, MIT, that asked a simulated consciousness to go through generations to see a generational evolution to see how robots would evolve. And it was given a task, get out of the box. Now the box that they referred to was a physical box, like a sand box that you would play in, signifying the experiment that was busy taking place, and a couple of different robot pieces inside it. And the robot consciousness was tasked with, how do I form robots that could get out of the box? Okay, but now, this thing, we can't wait for the robot to make this up now because it's going through calculations. So you have to speed it up, which is why they use quantum computing. And they said, let's run this thing for generations. So after about 6,000 years on the simulation, which obviously you can crunch the time so you can sit and watch the evolution happening, little sticks effectively start to move towards to each other. And it's almost like watching those old movies where they put two pieces of hardware down and then took a photo and then moved them a little bit and then took another photo and then moved them a little bit more and took another photo. So you have this almost static-like, robot-like move. And how the robot then assembles these pieces eventually ended up after about 6 or 6,500 years with something that looked like a triangular head and a neck that could elongate and shrink, two little arms that could rotate with almost like not a hook, but like a sharp edge to it, and what seemed like a spine that could also contract and expand. And effectively, out of the sandbox came this little device that could, with its head, hook onto something, get these little hooks to support it, grab a hold of it, contract the spine, let go of the neck, stick it into the next place, and sort of row itself out, row itself out of the thing. Now, that is not a human design. That is robotic design. So yes, they are already busy breeding robots. Here's the scary thing about the Watson, the DeepMind, and the Boston Dynamics that I showed you now. Boston Dynamics now, the latest one, 5 months old. IBM Watson, that was a 2011 clip. 2011. It's been learning and growing all the while in the background. The MIT experiment that I'd spoken about 2 years ago, fall of 2015. Okay, nanotech is another one. I'm going to illustrate it at the hand of a convergence with digital biology. So, ladies and gents, here the thing to note is that the top half of the slide is sort of the biohacker space. These are the garage tinkerers and the experiment takers, and the bottom is more the regulated space. So here, there's a technology called CRISPR-Cas9. You spell it like this, CRISPR, and then /Cas9. That's something to read about. This is a $1 trillion industry, at least. And I'll show you why I think that. So CRISPR-Cas9 effectively is like an RNA. And what it allows is for taking a DNA piece, which we all have, which is the fundamentals of who we are, and it allows to biologically unzip this DNA, and then using nanotech, being able to harvest surgically different bits and pieces out of this DNA set that you might not want there or want to experiment with, doing the same on another set of DNA and bringing in foreign pieces to the original set and then zipping it back up, allowing this modified life form to carry on. Okay, now that seems pretty wild. This is Stanford Health, where a team of 2 researchers said, well, what would happen if we put feline DNA together with the glow-in-the-dark pieces in algae DNA? So take the algae DNA, harvest the glow-in-the-dark bits and pieces of that DNA, stick it into the cat, zip it back up, and made glow-in-the-dark cats. So interesting thing, because I met with these oaks and I said, why would you do that? And the answer was, because we can. We thought we could, and now we know we can. So it's a very different mindset from regulatory or from business or to say, we're going to make an industry out of this. These are oaks that are saying, let's test the realms of possibility. So it's a different mindset from the commercials that typically brought us into this room today. Now, of course, the funny thing was, and they joked about this, so at least they were, had a sense of humor. They said to me, the number of feline cat fatalities is significantly decreased in the Stanford area by virtue of them lighting up at night. So the motorists saw them, so they wouldn't drive over them. And then the unintended consequence, of course, was that now the rat population has also gone through the roof because the rats can also see them coming. Next to it, DARPA. So DARPA is sort of the innovation arm of the military, where they spent a lot of money on trying to build capabilities out of the ordinary, one of which was night vision for soldiers. So can I now take the feline DNA components associated with seeing at night, stick them into a human, and then make a human that can see at night? They could get that right. They just couldn't get the switch right. So now, effectively, these injected individuals see with night vision all the time, which is great at night, but not so much during the other half when it's daytime. Okay, so these guys don't pay attention to rules. They're just doing whatever they want. They're testing the boundaries of the art of the possible. Below is now what happens when regulation catches up, because in all of these tech pieces, there is ultimately regulation. Can you remember Uber coming to South Africa, and in Cape Town they impounded all the Ubers? Not because government was against Ubers per se, but because they didn't know how to define them. Are these taxis or are these public transport units? So our definition doesn't allow for this ride-sharing platform service. No one owns the car. Where does it come from? We don't know how to do this. And so impound, that was the first regulatory reaction. And then, of course, later down the line, regulation catches up, by which stage the technology has already evolved again. I'll give you the Uber example in a bit. But effectively, inside of this realm, regulation has caught up. And it might be surprising to you to hear that in 2015, MPs in the UK, so House of Lords, had voted in legislation that allows for legally harvesting third-party DNA into embryos, to merge with embryos that are at risk for Parkinson's, diabetes, dementia. What's my other one? Parkinson's, dementia, diabetes, Alzheimer's. Ironic. Okay? Sorry, that's a poor joke. All right? That was in April 2015. Now, what that, again, let go of the mind here a little bit. That's 2 years ago. Since then, there have been more proposals around regulation. Since then, we've gotten better at understanding DNA, bearing in mind that we need as much as possible DNA into a pool and as much as possible computing power to look at that pool to be able to get to what are the traits associated with which part of the DNA, so that we understand this big machine that we're starting to play with. What happens when you turn on eyes, inadvertently, I don't know, you turn off ankles. Colloquially speaking, but you get my point. We know unintended consequences. In fact, I didn't build it into the presentation, but there's a company called 23andMe, which is a really cool name if you think about it, because there are 23 chromosomes that make up you. So 23andMe, cool name. You spit into a tube. It costs you $80 to send the thing back to the US, and then they do a DNA analysis on you. And they give you a report not only based on your physical traits and your ancestral heritage, but also as to your propensity to pick up illnesses, which the FDA have just in the last 3 months made legal again. So in other words, I can spit into a tube and know that I will get Alzheimer's. So I've had a look at my DNA as an example. Some fascinating things that you find inside of your DNA. For instance, one of the things that you'll find is, oh look, relatives that I did not necessarily know I had. There's some far-reaching consequences of being able to tell who's actually related and who's not. And that's why there's such great sensitivity around this stuff, in my view, why there's a space for healthy regulation, not just blanket regulation, but thought-through regulation. Steve, can you pass me the mashed potatoes? And I call you Steve because, frankly, we both know I can't call you Dad anymore. There are far-reaching consequences, brother, sister, that you might not have known about. But effectively, if you want to think about the art of the possible here, if we're able to manipulate DNA to get rid of those 4 diseases, and in time we find more data, as I've shown you in terms of learning curves of machines, it presupposes that we're able to find more associations and causality inside of the data sets, which means that we possibly could get to the point of saying, well, I want a taller baby. I want a faster running baby. I want better at maths baby. I want better linguistics. So are we on the brink of an era where you have Paralympics, normal Olympics, and perhaps augmented Olympics? Will we get to the point where there's no more Paralympics because, no, that's only anomaly cases. That's something that from birth we can manage up front. And what happens when regulation kicks in, and typically regulation is not one big harmonious effort across the planet, right? So China will do something long before South Africa does it, or the other way around. Think of Japan having now legalized bitcoins. The SARB doesn't know, South African Reserve Bank doesn't know, in a white paper openly states whether they should classify a bitcoin as a commodity or a currency. And in other words, whether or not this is customs and excise or exchange control. So right now, if you're making bitcoin profits, who knows what that is? So regulation hasn't caught up. Another regulation has already had that legalized. If I can manipulate the DNA of my one day, hopefully, baby, and in China, it can be diabetes-free, but in South Africa, either the capability or the regulation doesn't exist. You will bet money on it now. I will have my kid in China, and it will be Juan van der Post, and it will be diabetes-free. And then can you think, you laugh, okay? I say that funny, but still, what will happen to migratory patterns and societal structure? Will we still accept borders? And will we still allow for governments to put policy that we might not necessarily agree with, as has happened already in the case of Uber? We don't care about your definition. We want the service. Okay, now the digital democracy starts to kick into play. I'm going to talk about it a little later, but you had a question. It gives me time to drink water. Sorry, I warned you. Uncomfortable stuff.
So now you're talking about augmented humans basically popping out.
Yes.
Clearly then
perfect for you. I think you need a moment to digest this because I can see the question is swarming. Yeah, for those that could afford it. But remember, demonetize, democratize. Yeah. Do you play a musical instrument? You do? You've got it, right, in you? Yeah, I can see. I mean that in a very good way because you're going off the scripture in terms of the humanity aspect of this. I've had an artist say to me when I spoke about how we 3D print food, which I'll show you, by the way. I've had one of those patties, and said to him, it's exactly the same at a molecular level. He said, no, it's not. It never had soul, which is not something that I considered, but he's right, as are you. What happens when all the humans are homogeneous because we made them all the same? I don't think we will, because otherwise we'd all drive a white, Range Rover, and we don't. Okay, that might be out of price range. So we would have all driven a white Corolla, but we don't because humans are different and they have different aesthetical associations and values and priorities and the like. So I don't think that will happen. But here's the thing that scares me around this notion, right? So what happens when government starts to intervene, but it touches human rights? So we know that these genes make a criminal. Abort or change. Parent, change the baby. Okay, now hang on. Now we're all caught in a little bit of a thing here because we all like a society that's devoid of rapists and murderers and criminals, but I also want to stand on my human rights and say, you won't tell me what to do. Now which way do I go with this? So again, my music slide refers, we're going to have to know bloody well who we are and what we stand for and what we deem to be okay and not okay as a society, because we're going to be challenged on this. One more? Yes.
In other words, we don't know who we are until it's already been very clear who we are.
I'm not following.
So if government's regulations, and in fact our own regulations on how we perform our daily tasks, are behind what we are capable of, if that is the common factor going all the way through, we'll never truly be able to define who we are.
Sir, I'm going to stop you there because you have just fallen into a linear mindset trap. Okay? You are assuming that a whole bunch of other things remain the same while one thing changes, and then in the future, as you said, when government finally does catch up, who says that there will still be a government? If I can put my vote on the blockchain, I'll show you an IEC proof of concept that we worked on. I was involved. That suggests that you could put your vote as an asset onto the blockchain, which means we could vote in real time. And there won't be any manipulation of outcome of an election. And everyone has one vote. So there's no recounting of Florida to become president again, or just north of us. That sort of chaos. But more than that, don't think linearly. I challenge you, all of you, not just you, sir. Thank you for opening the question, first of all. So there's not a dig at you. But I challenge all of you to start thinking in an exponential way to say, well, why do we have actually a president in the first place? Not South Africa. Why do countries in the world, I know. Okay.
Willem, back to the script.
Okay.
Willem.
Now, Kevin here keeps me on script because I go off script. But I did say that this would be a conversation, so I'm going to do this and then I'll come back, all right? I'm running and he's trying to bring me back. Why do why do countries have a president? What is the role that dude or dudette fulfills? Like, other than like last month, Zimbabwe blowing $3.5 million to fly around between China and Mexico, like, what do? Set policy, make speeches, okay, dictation. But what is the functional value of having a president? And in fact, why aren't all of us, well, supposedly, but it doesn't work out that way. So the ideology and the reality are fundamentally different. Why are all of us not, perhaps with a technology like blockchain, where we can have real-time, transparent elections, why don't we say, stuff elections, we're all involved in every policy that gets set? Or, now maybe we're in an exponential world and we say, if you want to make comments or voting on the nuclear deal, perhaps you need to be in the energy space or the societal spend space or public pension fund administration space. So there's some criteria, imaginably, that enables you to be allowed to vote on some of these issues. Because frankly, I can't make comments on the South African space program. I'm not qualified. So why would I be allowed to vote for that? But I could make some serious contributions, whether they were right or wrong, to the financial services space. I have 20 years of experience in that. Or in the tech space, I could do that. But, some of you might not. But in other areas, you would be. So don't think linear. Government is going to change. This enables the era of digital democracy, where all of us are active citizens playing a role, and we should play a role. Okay, I'm going to go back to script because I can feel myself starting to slide here. I love Africa, so I don't want it to go where it's going. I turned it off. Okay, just quickly back on script. I'm happy to entertain some of this break time or subsequently. These are conversations that must be had. Let me Kevin's giving me the eye. Here's the $1 trillion thing that I spoke about. What happens when you put CRISPR-Cas9 into the tumor of cancer? So in other words, cancer has its own DNA. Can I put sabotage, like higher aging range frequency, into the tumor of the cancer and allow it to die without having to put the entire human through chemotherapy, where we effectively blast the human and hope that the cancer dies before the human dies and then revive the human? The thinking around this is, and there are not one or two companies, incidentally, that are working on this. The thinking is because so many companies are working at this and pushing this agenda that you'll have in the next short number of years, humans walking around with what used to be terminally classified cancer, walking around in society like they have a common cold, because we'll be able to solve it without all of this paraphernalia that we currently go through. So there's also not just uncomfortable stuff, business is going to change, we're all doomed. There's also, I think, great things that will come out of this. The light side of utilizing this technology to solve humanitarian challenges. How are you for comfort? Do you want to take a quick stand-up break? Not leave the room, but just stand. Let's do that. Just quickly stand up, stretch a leg. I'll give you 1.5 minutes, and then we're going to carry on. All right. Sorry for my soapbox there.
Check out technology.
I beg you?
We'll check out technology.
Yeah, everyone on their phones quickly. Run.
Is to buy time to ask yourself why we're in business, to buy time so we can have some stuff like this.
I like that.
Willem.
Someone asked, can the Moody's app be cheated if you watch an actor on TV?
Okay, I'll use that as an opening. Can you read it for me out loud on the thing? Okay, we got a question on Slido, which I don't see many people typing into. So
No, not very many people. Have you tried the Moody app on actors on TV? Does it register the acted emotion as real?
I haven't. That's a really, really good question. I think we should test it. That might be a way to select the next Grammy, Tony Awards, or what's the thing? Oscars, thank you. Oscar Awards, yeah. Yeah, who empirically is the best actor? It's not who we like most. My money is on Sean Connery. Okay, with that, let's roll on, ladies and gents. If I could ask you to take a seat. I'm going to take a bigger break just now. I saw some people using the gap for coffee. That's very clever. I'll make a longer break in a second, and then, or just now rather. All right, so let's talk about 3D printing. The thing that we've now astonishingly learned is actually 39 years old. I'm going to give you a quick example of macro and micro, and then we'll talk about some of the ramifications in terms of slide number 2, uncomfortable stuff. Here, ladies and gents, is a little high school, was a high school kid, is now 19. At the time of the clip was 19, and his teeth, he thought wasn't lacquer, it was skew. You can see here where the cursor is, odd one out. So he looked at this and he said, oh, I want to fix this. Went to an orthodontist, got a quote. Just incidentally, show of hands, who's got kids that have had braces? Okay, so you will now know exactly where this is going. It is expensive, very expensive. In fact, this young man was quoted in the region of $8,000 to fix the teeth, and he said, well, I don't have that, but I am a little DIY innovator willing to push the boundaries, and so he made a mold of his teeth in his university science lab, and he 3D printed his own braces that he just, whenever the time came, took off and reprinted the next set and reprinted the next set, and he ultimately ended up fixing his teeth for a sum total cost of $80.93. Now, if your original bill was going to be $8,000 and now you pay $80, that is a fundamental shift. And my question to you is, how long do you think it is before a private equity firm or a venture capital firm, depending on how you define it, which is also subject to change, picks up this technology and sticks it into a franchise model and rolls it out all over the planet, and we sell it for $800? By which time, at the meantime, sort of the price of 3D printing is becoming less and less and less, so the margin becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you are a 4th or a 5th year medicine student hoping to be an orthodontic specialist in the near future, I think you are in serious trouble, because this takes away the need to qualify. It takes for braces. Takes away the need to build a practice, get capital, buy the equipment, rent the space, get a hold of the insurance, assistance. Like that entire value chain is just fundamentally shifted out from under you. Like imagine 2 days before you graduate, you see this clip. On IBM Watson, if you want to just talk medicine, so there's 2 ways you can cut all of these exposures that I'm giving you. You can either do it per industry or per technology, but let's just meander a little bit between them. In the medicine fraternity, can I ask you what you think the average aggregate accuracy rate of diagnoses is inside of a GP's office? In other words, what's the percentage of getting it right by a GP in the world? I've got some 60s there, 20, 38. Our number is 38 on average. Now, aren't you lucky you're alive? Because last time you had a headache, you might have had liver surgery on that sort of percentage. And here's the thing. You wake up, you're in a bad mood because you're sick. You have bad traffic getting to the doctor. You had a fight with your wife on the way in. And then you're a little bit concerned because you're not at work doing KPIs. So, there's some other long-term effects that you face. You end up waiting, reading old shitty magazines that have been out of, the cover has started to fade. That's how old the stuff is. And eventually you make it to the doctor after you've filled out your name 16 times, but the guy's been in the same shop for however long, and you've seen him like for the last 18 years, yet he's still asking me what my name is. And then you walk in and you try to articulate a condition to which you're not certified to do any articulation on, to a guy that's got to listen to this that probably came through the same system of interference with traffic and wife and whatever the king might be. And then he listens to you. And listening is not a skill that humans have in abundance. It's not a great skill set. So can you imagine the disconnect between those two? It's no wonder it's 38. In fact, it's surprising that it's as high as 38. Where's my little clicker? So the thinking is that IBM Watson will probably be the world's only doctor. That I'll be able to tell my phone through either touch or fluid or whatever the case might be what's wrong with me, and that the diagnosis will be done on an empirical basis out of data, and it will not wonder if I have 1 or 2 or 3 different conditions. It'll tell me. In the break, if you want, come talk to me about what Harvard Medical School has found by utilizing Watson in a race against the humans. Ladies and gents, a bit more of a macro and perhaps more thematic application. Here's a 3D printer printing a house. So the idea was to change the print bed and the composite that goes into the top. This house was printed in a day. So in other words, if you've ever built a house, you'll know it takes about 9 months if you have a really good builder. And a lot of frustration and pain and arguing and emails and threats of lawsuits. And eventually you get done. This takes that process and takes 8 months and 30 days off a 9-month process. That is revolutionary. That's not a slight increase or improvement. Now, it's an experiment, so you might look at it and say, ooh, I wouldn't live in that house. Yeah, you're right. Neither would I. But it's the start of a technology. It's the deceptive phase. And so a short while after that experiment, a Chinese company got a hold of this and said, well, how can we supercharge this? And so they changed the print bed to scale, and they printed 24 homes in 24 hours. That is 24 times the value proposition that's just disrupted the 9 months value proposition. And the time of the chain, in other words. So it's not years until the next individual starts to do a little experiment along the same vein. It's all over the world. People are looking at this and going, capability. Now, if we have a housing issue, for instance, in South Africa, I think this could be a fantastic solution. Incidentally, the cost of a 300 square meter home, $2,000 US. What is the cost of a 300 square meter home in just here, Welgemoot or Mowbray or, okay, we won't go Clifton because we know that's a little bit different. But what is the cost versus a $2,000 price point? And if that does happen, can you imagine the long-term wealth preservation consequences of being able to all of a sudden supply much faster, much cheaper? And that's a thing that I'll carry on talking about. In the exponential world, this is another type of experiment that we had done. This is Under Armour and New Balance, where we said build a mobile application that allows for the photography, like in a panoramic shot of each foot of the consumer. You remember my saying that consumers will demand different things? So right now, I have a little bit of a blister on my right foot because these shoes are new, and they're hurting me a little bit because they're not stretched fully to taken the mold of my foot just yet. So here you would take the picture of each foot and upload that architecture into a cloud-based service that would then interface with what's called additive manufacturing, which is a fancy word for 3D printing, and your shoe will be printed for you for your left foot or your right foot. So gone, in other words, are the days of a UK 10, 11, 12. It is Willem's left foot, Willem's right foot. Now, how long do you think it is before one of these big companies with a lot of innovation money say, let's make this the standard? In fact, I know that both of the ones involved here and 2 others, so there's 4 main competitors, one has got a little tick, are looking at this and saying, how do we get every shoe manufacturer to use our product? Because perhaps we're not a shoe manufacturing company anymore. Perhaps we are a platform company that allows other shoe manufacturers and consumers to get together to use data to become shoe producing. In other words, once you've uploaded your feet onto my platform, any producing company can say, I want to make a shoe for that guy. And so we utilize that data on an automated basis to say, well, send the consumer an email, potentially, of what the shoe construct could look like, and then let the consumer say, no, light blue, not dark blue. Change the tick, add my name in the middle. I don't like veters, what's that? I don't like, thank you, laces, give me a zip. And the consumer mass customize and hits print and then picks up the shoe the next day at the facility where it was printed. Now that sounds odd when the first company does it and the first consumers start to talk about it in social media around how comfortable and easy and cheap, by the way, this is. No other company will be able to not jump onto this platform. So gone are the days of a sweatshop that makes, pays $3 a month to some little kid that builds or makes enough shoes to put into a box, to put into a container, to put onto a boat, that goes through customs and excise, does the reverse where it lands, and ultimately it lands up in Aldo where you buy it. That's a lot of jobs and a lot of commerce changing, and that's a lot of tax base that starts to shift in terms of what you're able to collect as a fiscus. So good to pay attention. If you want to go have a look at some of the designs that have come out of this, 3dshoes.com, and there would be others as well. Now, ladies and gents, all of my exponential curves go up. There's another thing that happens here, and there's a curve that goes down, and that's a cost curve. This is an example in the energy space of the price of a kilowatt hour of energy. Now, if you're not in the fraternity, a kilowatt hour of energy is like a bucket of energy, or like a kilometer, or like a liter. It is the unit of measurement. So there's a price over time in the 1977 space, $76.67 US cents per kilowatt hour. And then, of course, nanotech, scale economy, rollout of the technology, improvement of the technology has forced that price to come down, where in 2014, we had $0.36 US per kilowatt hour. That is a massive exponential change. And in fact, this was a picture that I took in Dubai, where I had a visa issue, or a plane issue, and I got out on a visa, and I had some exponential fellow showing me around, and I thought this is just something that is priceless. You have to take a picture when you see an oil sheikh standing in a solar farm, because that is one big irony. And I had a little chuckle about this. This is what used to be one of the biggest solar farms in the world, and it produces a kilowatt hour at 0.0299 cents per kilowatt hour. That kills coal, it kills wind almost, and it kills nuclear for sure. And if you think about the fact that we're about to put pension money, state pension money, into a technology that will take 30 years to come online, this curve is not going to stop. This curve is going to carry on slicing and slicing and slicing the cost and proliferating into the deliverability, so democratizing all over the planet. I think that by the time that nuclear comes online, not only will it be obsolete, clearly, it will also be illegal for the environmental considerations and the humanitarian considerations around it. And just a point to make, sir, because you're not alone in the linear thinking. I'm exposed to this stuff every day for the last 5 years. I make this mistake. And I said, because I made it when I said to the guy, oh, this is going to be funny. People are going to laugh when I show them an oil shake in a solar panel thing. And the oak said to me, yeah, you will be talking to smart people, and they won't laugh because they'll recognize on this curve that this is going to be the norm. It's not going to be funny. It'll be funny to see an oil shake in an oil field. Because even the sheikhs, all of them have realized it and started that investment. Okay, I'm moving on a little bit faster, but pause me, forward me. This is your conversation. Here's drones. Ladies and gents, the reason why we think that drones are an exponential technology is because they're doubling in their payload capacity, so what they can carry, how far they can carry, and how quick they can carry it. So at the bottom right is the illustrative clip of Drone racing, so these are the enthusiasts and the hobbyists. They make drones faster, lighter, more responsive, better at navigating, easier to repair, cheaper parts. They push the technology forward. They're like my oaks that do the cat injection with a different DNA to make it glow in the dark. They are primarily responsible for the unregulated space where they advance the technology. The consequence of which is that a series of other applications have now come to light. I often get asked the question, will self-driving cars come to South Africa? They're already here. They are already here. There are two of the super big tech companies that have got prototypes here now. One of them is Tesla. It just doesn't look like a Tesla because they don't want everyone to know about it. And of course, they wanted to test emerging market driving conditions, which led to a little joke that we now say, you know, AI is super powerful, but no amount of AI can ever deal with taxi drivers. So we don't think that self-driving cars can integrate with society as it's structured in the current way. But what we do think will happen is passenger drones. I'll show you a clip here. This is from Las Vegas last year. This is a Consumer Electronics Show prototype built. It works. Pilotless passenger drone. In other words, I get in, I tell it where I want to go, and it takes me there. You can see the cost flashes up every now and again. I forget the number. I think it's $20,000, which is a lot of money. But in terms of the first prototype, if you saw my cost curve come down, this will soon be $1,000. And then the question, of course, is going to be, are we actually going to own these drones ourselves? I don't think so. I think it'll be either community-owned or like a platform-owned. In fact, if you have a look at the US Patent Office, there is a patent called VTOL, VTOL, that has been registered within the last couple of months. It's registered by Uber. VTOL stands for vertical takeoff and landing. And the thinking is that autonomous vehicles, like they have in Pittsburgh already, will drive you around to a designated VTOL area where you will be introduced into this device or a device similar to this that will lift the problem from the ground before it gets into civil aviation, airspace, or Civil Aviation Authority. It's off the ground where you have to worry about the integration with humans, and you've got multiple channels of airspace, low flying, where you're able to deploy passenger deployment. And in fact, there's a really big property company in Joburg that we've been speaking with as regards these changes, and the next construct of malls, super malls that they're building, won't have parking lots, because they know a car will drop you off that you don't own. And if anything, if you come from a little bit further and there's congestion, they've created VTOL landing spaces on these malls, effectively allowing the ability to vertically take off and land from the mall. So what will we do with all that real estate space? Can we repurpose it? You know, perhaps it becomes recreation. How will the future of retail look? I'll show you some of that thinking as well. Okay, so I've made the point. Let's talk about blockchain just really quickly. I touched on it earlier in terms of the digital democracy. It's not only a thing that will screw the banks, and Scott had touched on it earlier. A bank at the moment, if you get a grip on who understands blockchain here. You want to tell us what the blockchain is, if you don't mind? It's very warm in here. Can we do something about the aircon?
Well, I understand it's like a ledger that gets updated with different transactions. If you have 5 or 10 transactions, they get distributed to 10, 100 computers. Everyone updates the same ledger.
Yeah.
Even your entry gets added to all the different ledgers.
Okay.
Everyone's got the same copy.
Okay, that's beautiful. That's a little bit more advanced than what most people know of the blockchain. And effectively, you're right. The old school way of thinking about it was there was a single ledger, and the bank controlled it, and they put lots of dollars of security around this thing. Because if someone changed something in that ledger or managed to, then you as a ledger owner or influenced person might be affected negatively by it. But what happens if you take that ledger and, like a cookie, you crumble it, and you take those crumbs and you scatter it all over the internet, and you make everyone say, group consensus as to whether or not a transaction is valid or not, which takes the need for a banker entirely out the way. If I wanted to sell a house, you know, I had the house, you had the money, I didn't trust you, you didn't trust me, so we got the bank in the middle. But if I put it on blockchain, we could write an electronic contract that says, if you have the money and you like my house, if I like your money and I don't want the house, conditions are met, exchange. Electronic title deeds. And what Scott was talking about isn't something that's still in the thinking. This is Estonia that have put their land registry, in other words, their title deeds office has now become fully digitized because all the land and the title deeds associated has now been put onto the blockchain. I spoke about the IEC and about blockchain type voting. And of course, this enables things like cryptocurrencies, which, as I had mentioned, reserve banks don't know how to deal with. And so you find this international flow of money that's not controllable. China tried to control it for a while. They gave up. On Wednesday, they put out an application to say, there's nothing we can do about this. This is not like censorship of Google search returns. just let it ride free. So we're nearing the age of a global, ubiquitous currency. That's going to change a lot of things. Okay, we'll talk blockchain in a little bit more with Jaco and them. I wanted to show you where we are in the space of virtual reality, and then we're going to take a little bit of a break. At the bottom right is an illustration of a company. In fact, both are illustrations of a company by the name of Magic Leap. Magic Leap is the best kept secret in Silicon Valley because it's not in Silicon Valley, it's inside of Florida. And what these guys have gotten right is a new way of producing images. So up until now, virtual reality, if you think about the headsets that you wear, would be a screen that you look at. And as you turn your head, there's some clever mathematics to know that you've turned your head. But I'm still the exact same space and angle from the thing that I'm looking at. What Magic Leap have gotten right is to use optic fiber to project the image that they want you to see into your eye. In other words, they've gotten rid of this depth perception or parallax issue that has been faced with technology up until now. They've rethought effectively how to do VR, because it's not something that I look at, it is something that I actually end up seeing, which means depth perception goes away, angle of looking at it goes away, and opens up, because it's digital, a variety of other applications, such as, why do I still have a cell phone if I could wear, oh, this is the important thing, I'm not saying it right. They do this through clear lenses. So the spectacles that you wear, or the contact lens potentially that you wear, would project this into your peripheral. So it's not looking at a device, it's feeding me this. And that changes things like the capability that we have around, why do I have a cell phone? If I could project everything that I would see, like this thing is illustrating. Now, to give you an idea of how real this is, I've got another clip here. Let me just pause this. And now I just need to remember how to do this. There we go. So this is a high school gym where the participants, some of the participants in the room have got this capability on their faces and some don't. So the clip cut off a little bit on the side. Now just have a look at the experience they've been taken through in order to illustrate the capability of Magic Leap. Felt quite real, right? It's going to do it again in slow motion. And you can see some of their reactions. So some of the people are wondering, why the hell are these people reacting the way that they're reacting? Because they see nothing. Yet the other individuals are busy going through this experience. Now, when this whale lands, notice that there's a big splashback. And over here are some people sitting that actually, if you saw them on the other angle camera, are wiping off the water that they think is on them, but isn't. That's how real this is for them. Now, this will change retail, amongst other things. It'll change education. It'll change how we do and think about tourism. It'll change how we do investments. If you think of Scott and them, I mean, at some point, their company's got to go this way and say, how do I make the investor see the actual property that they're investing in? Or why don't I just bring the property to them? And if the thing sits in Atlanta, I can download it. And so I think Jaco and them are already busy using 3D cameras to start recording some of this stuff. That's one application. It's not Magic Leap, but that's I want you to think inside of that space and what's the art of the possible. Why would I go to a mall if I could say, I like those jeans and that jacket, and download the software for being able to view it, and in the comfort of my home, I look at my own mirror and I can see what it would look like. Change color, change color, change color, change color, trim it in a little bit, make it a little bit shorter, and add my own little flair of whatever the hell it is, manufacture. That's the way that retail's going. And by the way, you can see here, they're already starting the retail type example, so the thinking is already aligned with that. One more before we take a break. I'll show you space, and I warned you about some uncomfortable stuff. I show this clip, A, because I like it, and B, because it illustrates the point of the next frontier.
We'll do tea at 4 o'clock. Yeah.
Tea at 4 o'clock. Perfect. Okay, so it's 15 minutes. Can you hold out? Yeah. Okay, let's go then. All right, so we always used to say space, the final frontier. It's not. Okay, it's just another frontier. And I'll show you why I say this. This is a video clip, an actual video clip of a craft that's been modified. And it's got Boeing engines as well as rocket engines. And it takes off from an airport not far outside of San Francisco and goes into Civil Aviation Authority space, then into military space, and then into International Space Federation space. They always joke and say the next bit is God's space. So you go really, really high. Space starts at 82 kilometers. This thing goes to 100. Before it gets there, it does 3 parabolic flights. So in other words, where the plane falls out of the air effectively, and you're in it, and so you experience almost weightlessness. And it does it at 1/3 of your body weight, and then climbs back out of this thing. So you're on your stomach or on your back, lying in this padded aircraft, and the thing is pulling G-force as it starts to climb. And then it does it again and again. The second and the third loop are at 1/6 of your body weight. And this is apparently to get you acclimatized to the fact that you don't want your blood to separate. Apparently, there's a similar thing if you come up from scuba diving too fast. And so the depressurization causes bubbles, something of the like. So they do this to fix that. And effectively, you'd lie, and with the same power that you would use 2 fingers to close your laptop or to press a button on your mouse, if you still have a mouse, you would press down and you would literally start to float. They told us the first thing that's going to happen to all of you, they said to us, you are all doggy paddlers. And we said, what? That you're all doggy paddlers. What do you mean? So when you get to 0 gravity, you're going to doggy paddle. And we said, no, we won't. Specifically, I remember going, I will not doggy paddle. All right? And the first thing, of course, that happens when gravity goes out from under you, you start to doggy paddle because you're trying to correct. And it was just such a significant moment for me because I think that's exactly my slide number 2, what used to happen in corporate. Things change, and then you try to do old things in a new world because you think that's going to make, and it takes you a bit of time to realize it's not going to change anything. So I share with you, we drifted to the one window, luckily not out. We drifted to the one window, and then you look at space, and you're at 100 kilometers, and there's no interference with atmosphere or ozone anymore. So you have clean HD, infinite space on your side. And you look at it, and you realize this thing doesn't end. It just carries on and on. And then a couple kilometers out, there would be orbiting satellites, some of them 10 times the size of this room, some of them really, really small, the communications ones, and they bullet around the planet at 6,000 kilometers an hour, and all of a sudden that seems slow because they're over there, and you can see them kind of move this way. And the sheer relativity of everything in your life starts to dawn on you. And then the big thing happens, you drift over to the other end of the plane, and you look out, and there's your planet. And you can see the curvature of the Earth, and you think to yourself, everything that I've ever heard, everything that I've been taught, every person that I know, every joke that I've ever laughed at, everything that I know comes from there. And look at the size of everything over here. And how long will we mind the trivialities of differences between us? Religion, race, language, orientation. Those are actually not really big issues. We've made them really big. And if we just took the math of this, we will realize that we're not alone. Okay, now I know I might be stepping on some belief toes here, but with that math, you can't be alone. And I wonder what will happen when the human race makes contact with another race and we realize that, in fact, empirically we're not alone, and whether we'll still mind these small, little, insignificant, in my view, differences between us. Okay, the point that I'm making here is that space is not far off. It's around the corner. There is a company called Moon Express, which on the 24th of July was granted a license by the American government to land on the moon. It's a private company to land on the moon, not a governmental institution. And that's significant because they're hoping to set up a refueling station for dudes like Musk who want to come by, maybe not with such a big ship loaded with fuel for the rest of the journey, but just get to the moon out of the orbitational pull of the Earth, refuel, and then carry on. And so there's actually a shareholder mandate to go and build that. Typical California, right? So will it work? I don't know. But someone's trying, and they've put $1 billion next to doing it, so they're going to give it a shot. And the next one might get it right, or the one thereafter, but soon we're in that space. Our kids are going to talk about space travel as if it were normal. We think it's the final frontier. It's not. Okay, I've got 7 minutes, and then we're breaking. I can see the tea being set up. Here's crowd. Okay, so one of the technologies that we talk about is the power of the crowd. I had to change this slide. I had to put this in here because in Palo Alto, when you say to execs, the best people don't work for your organization, some of them are a little bit insecure, so they include themselves into that talk, and so they take umbrage with that. So I had to say, the best people in the world don't all work for you. So you're fine, but everyone else cast doubt on. And so there's two things on crowd. There's sourcing and funding. I want to show you sourcing first. Check this out. This is a 16-year-old kid.
The winner of the $75,000 2012 Gordon E. Moore Award in the category of Medicine and Health Sciences from Crown Jack Thomas.
My name is Jackie Andraka. I'm 16 years old. I'm a medical entrepreneur, an education activist, and a global change maker.
Okay, so this young man won a prize for developing a sensor that picks up pancreatic cancer in early stage. Now, if you know anything about pancreatic cancer, it's super aggressive, and we struggle to identify it, which means that by the time it's been diagnosed, it's too late to do something about it. So this guy had someone in the family that had unfortunately died by virtue of pancreatic cancer and said that I don't accept this. I just simply don't accept it. there must be better that we as a society can do. And so armed with information from Google and a high school science lab, he built this thing. 26,000 times cheaper than the cheapest sensor, 99.9% accuracy, takes 3 minutes to administer. And you'll hear him say it's like a pregnancy test, but for pancreatic cancer. Now that should have come out of Harvard Medical School or Stanford Health or one of the big institutions, but it didn't. It came out of a 16-year-old kid's mind that was armed with enough information, tools, and passion. Now, ladies and gents, just because this is so profound, I want you to listen to how this then 15-year-old kid talks about himself. Just listen to how he describes himself in this clip. Other than leaving out drama queen.
My name's Jackie Andraka. I'm 16 years old. I'm a medical entrepreneur, an education activist, and a global change maker.
Geez, like, when I was 15, I skateboarded, and I stole peaches from the neighbor. Okay? I wasn't the medical change maker or global change maker. And it shows you a societal move, both in terms of being passion and purpose-driven, as well as armed with tools to be able to do things now that we would ordinarily consider impossible because we're just normal humans. That era is over, and that makes a lot of people really nervous. Because one of the things that we think can come out of this is a revamp in how companies deal with talent. I put that on my third slide. Talent will change. I'll give you an example of GigWalk and GitHub. What we see now is that CVs coming out of the US aren't the traditional way of looking at CVs anymore. People aren't illustrating their pedigree. Now here's a little Willem and Scott thing. I'm sure if you put UCT on your CV, it'll be looked at a little bit different, perhaps, not as positively as having Stellenbosch on your CV, okay? But what we see is that the pedigree doesn't matter anymore. I'm from Guernsey, and then I went to Stellenbosch, and then I did my MBA at Harvard. People don't care about that. The companies want a particular solution provided, and they're willing to pay for that solution, irrespective of how well you look on paper. Now, that's a big, big change. And to illustrate it, what some of these companies have gotten right is a very real example. I'll give you one from GitHub. So in the Coca-Cola space, if you as Coca-Cola wanted to know that enough Coca-Cola is being sold in, Manhattan, you would typically hire a marketing research firm that would bill you $500,000 US and take 3 months to get to the point of having deployed a variety of researchers on their payroll to every shop inside of Manhattan where there's a Coca-Cola being sold, and take a picture and do a count of whatever's in the fridge, and then put that onto a piece of paper and a clipboard. And then at night, after having done 6 or 7 of these shops, they would put that in an Excel spreadsheet, and there would be 100 of them doing this all over. And they'd work Manhattan from the south to the north. And at the end of all of this, they'd put all of this in a spreadsheet, and someone would review the spreadsheet and ask some questions, and it would go back, edit, change, come back. Another set of review, come back, edit, change, go up the line. And eventually, 4 months later, get to the people that asked the question in the first place, by which time all that Coke has either been sold or stale or stolen, or you're late on your reaction capability because the data is old. So what if we change that and we use the power of the crowd? So a little social experiment. What if we made a platform that enabled AI and your camera? And you could walk as any individual that wanted to participate into any shop in Manhattan and say, here's a Coke, take a picture. And that picture would upload and AI would do the count. And what if we incentivize people by saying, we'll give you $5 to go count in the Target shop on Fifth Avenue? And so what they found is that there was an overwhelming enthusiasm around this. They put this on the platform, and some people would race each other to get to the shop first. So you say, Coca-Cola's doing a thing, and and everyone that got the app, you see people running around Manhattan trying to snap as many as possible of these pictures. The bottom line of which is what it cost them $50,000 and took about 8 days to do the entire Manhattan. Sorry, I beg your pardon, 8 hours to do the entire Manhattan. Now that's 8 hours relative to months that the process would have taken you earlier at a fraction of the cost, and I'm not employing anyone. I'm not employing anyone. In the computer science space, there's an outfit called GitHub. And effectively, coding companies are now starting to rent you based on your ranking on GitHub. Whether you came from Harvard or Yale or Stanford or University of Pennsylvania or North Texas, doesn't matter. They don't care. It's can you code what you say you can code. We don't care about your profile. Can you offer the solution that it is that we're after? The power of the crowd is immense. A quick practical story. So we have a really big insurer in the US, and they've got 50 actuaries that look at the data. Now, if you're not in the insurance space, humor me. An insurance company income statement looks like this. Premiums come in at the top, then I pay payroll, and I rent some offices, and a whole bunch of other costs, and then the big thing, claims. Someone needs to be paid for something that was stolen, or broken, or lost. I need to predict those claims because no one can see the future and what's coming. Okay, how do I do that? Get some actuaries and do some models. 24, you must be a bad driver, so you're likely to have an accident, you're going to have a claim, let me provide for you. Here's the catch. If you under-provide, there will be more claims in practicality than what you budgeted for, which means you make less money than what you thought, which means your share price goes down. If you over-claim, because that's now the natural reaction, well, why don't I over-provide? That'll make the claims look small. Yeah, but then the analysts say, you don't know what's going on in your business, and your share price goes down. So you need to get this thing exactly right. Hence, highly paid actuaries that you put inside of this space. Okay. We say to them, but the power of the crowd. They say, 50 actuaries. Power of the crowd, actuaries. Power of the crowd, actuaries. What if we made a competition? Take some old data, get rid of the personalized stuff, so make it anonymous, put it on the internet, and put a challenge out there to say anyone in the world that can make this algorithm of predicting the claims better can win some money. They said, okay, lekker. But one thing, it must be by at least 1%. Otherwise, like, we've wasted our time, right? Or, put a hurdle there. Very cocky. Put the data out on the internet. 8 days later, a tattoo artist out of New York sends them an algorithm that improves the claims accuracy by 227%. 227%. They send him a plane ticket and a check and a job offer. A week goes by. They call him and they say, what's the story? He said, no, I gave the money to a charity. I don't like Chicago. I'm not coming there. So I like New York. So I tore up the plane ticket, And the job offer, no, I'm not going to work there. I draw pictures on people's skin. That's what I do. I do math for fun. I can imagine these actuaries with egos and thousands of years of experience looking at this. And so the question that we pose to individuals is, number one, do you think that you're still going to be employed in the old fashion if more companies realize that they could pay $50,000 for a single solution as opposed to having 50 actuaries on the books at $200,000 US each for payroll for a year, and then hope that you can fill up their spare time with enough KPIs to find some value out of them? I don't think so. And the majority of youngsters coming out of US universities now have already realized it because they're not writing their CVs in the old way anymore. They're saying, I'll be project-based. And as a result of that, you find that education is starting to change because now, who wants to go to study for 4 years to solve a problem that by the time that you graduate, it doesn't exist anymore because technology has already solved it, or the problem statement in itself has changed? So you find modularized, and we've got to punt our own thing here as well, modularized education pieces that say, right, I'll teach you what you need to know, when you need to know it, in real time, in a short possible time. Now, I'm about to get on a soapbox, and then you're going to have some tea. So let me just say this. Sir, how many days leave did you take last year? You're retired, so you were 100% leave. Okay, bad example. On your last year of work, what was the number? Ballpark. 25. Okay, that sounds like company standard. Scott, I can't ask you. Willie. Willie? Nog hier so? Okay, let's use you. Go, the other one I can't see there. Days leave last year? Yeah. 7. Quite a big difference, right? 3-fold difference, more or less. Okay, I took 40 last year, and the year before that I took 3. So now get this. If between individuals we're that different and on a basic level as to how much rest and recuperation we need to get ready for the next year's worth of peak performance, and even in and amongst ourselves we can go from 3 to 40, so such a big difference. If those differences exist at a basic human level, then how on earth is it possible that we all take 12 years to finish school? Who's tested that? Yeah. Okay, I'm not going to debate that. Scott, you win. Right? The thing is that surely some of us are a little bit better at math, and you could have done that in 8 years. Some of us need a bit longer to go through this, but we can't admit that because then you're a little bit dumb. So society has this benchmark because of the post-Victorian structure that we call schooling that says 12 years, because what we want to produce is lawyers, doctors, CAs, teachers, and nurses. And other things are a little bit odd. Now, of course, we've evolved a little bit from that initial base thinking, but the evolution has been linear while the world has been exponential. And now we sit with the consequence of a university system that doesn't cater for the future anymore. Now, right here, I'm just going to make a little punt. I'm a firm believer in this education revolution. I'm heavily invested in it as a consequence. And we started this thing, the Exponential Africa Institute. And initially, I was talking to corporates, and then I had all the politics and horse shit that I spoke about earlier. This is aimed at school kids, to inform them as to the kind of stuff that you're learning about today so that they can see what the future is going to look like and understand. I'll give you an example. To study law right now, I'm sorry to say, is really dangerous. Really dangerous. There's an experiment called law.bot, a robot lawyer. And it took your traffic infringements in the time that it was running, and it would look at it and say, there's some procedural errors on this thing. I will make an appeal for you, which you can submit, and then obviously later on auto-submit. Had a 100% hit rate in getting traffic infringement fines revoked. Or it would tell you, you are going to have to pay this fine. So you can either take the opportunity of ducking every time you see a traffic thing where they stop people, or just pay, because you're not going to win this. Now, my thing is, what do you think is going to happen when the judge becomes electronic as well, or robotized? We're not going to have lawyers that charge 2,000 Rand an hour and that pay an advocate that charge 50,000 Rand a day to sit in court and then drag their feet for as long as possible. I'm sorry if you're a lawyer. Can you remember Scott's example of the estate agent? They're incentivized to make a deal. They're not incentivized to get you the best deal because they get paid on the conclusion of the deal, not paid on how the customer feels about the deal afterwards. So the incentive is all wrong. Drag the thing out for as long as possible so we can milk the fees because you need it because I'm a lawyer and I'm a specialist. Well, I can log a specialist call now to a robot that doesn't do that and charge me 5 Rand per instance. So if you are a school kid and you think, I'm going to be Danny Crane, LA Law, what are the most recent ones? Ally McBeal, right? That's even
That's
old.
not recent.
Suits. Right?
Suits.
Yeah. As romantic as that may seem, it is folly. It'll end in disaster. We teach kids how to do that through a course that we say, come, I'll show you what a 3D printer can do. If you think you're going to be an architect, come, I'll show you what generative design is if you think you're going to make design work. I will show you, if you think you're going to be a musician, how AI is busy coding music now and has sold the first one on iTunes. Now, ask yourself this, who's going to pay tax on that? The robot? Bill Gates says we should tax robots. He's actually come out loud and said that. People think he was high when he said it. No, he's being very, very sane. So education changes as well. Then crowdfunding, lots of industries being mobilized through platforms like Wealth Migrate. In this space here, one of the last things that Barack Obama did was to make equity participation, so not buying your product or being a supporter. I buy shares in your company, made it legal in the US, and that legislation was the first earthquake, and the ripple effect will go across the globe. More and more and more companies are starting to enable legally the flow of funds into a crowd participation. So in other words, we're looking at different ways of doing stock exchanges now. IPO, going public with your company, fundamental reform about to come.
Dude, the tea's ready.
Tea's ready.
Yeah, so why don't you
this
hold
slide
on
and
that
then we can go.
Okay, yeah, and then because the tea's all ready.
Okay, I know
so.
there's a bit of discomfort also. I can feel it myself. In 2013...
My Moody's tells me that it's time to have tea.
Yeah, it's your senses. In 2013, it was already a $5 billion industry. And then we said, oh, look at it, it's big, it's huge. It's nothing compared to where it is now. Here in the US last year, it was $17.25 billion US dollars. The US alone, there are some other graphs in there that'll show you what the numbers look like. So this is something that's really picking up pace and is allowing investment into a variety of other alternatives where ordinarily you would not have been legally able to get to those deals, even if you did have the networks, which 99% of people don't. Okay, that was the last one on, on crowd. Okay, so let's disrupt this session a little bit and have some tea.
Just before we go for tea, one thing that's really important, a number of you in this room know who Roger Hamilton is. If you don't, go and Google him. I'd recommend you look him up. His son, about a year or two ago, I met his son. He was 15 years old. He started a business. He crowdfunded it, and he raised $45,000, which is more than $500,000 Rand. Most South Africans don't know how to raise $500,000 Rand. And this guy was 15. So, you know, what Willem's talking about here is really, really exciting. But on that note, let's...